Hey, good morning, fellow planners. Looks like we got about 6 students joining us through the live casting today, so it looks like things are going okay. So, welcome to class. Welcome to lecture, course lecture number 3. Today we'll be talking about the urban citizen and globalization. So to kick things off, hopefully, fingers crossed, the internet gremlins won't be bothering us today. I know we had some technical difficulties last Thursday. After we got done teaching that class, I actually called my mentor up in Santa Fe, one of my professional mentors, and was venting to him about the technology issues that we had. And turns out that he had actually had a bunch of problems with the internet. And so I talked to a few more people, and it looks like on Thursday, the internet was going kind of wonky for a lot of people. So hopefully the internet gremlins leave us alone today, and this is a successful live stream. You may notice the live stream looks a little bit different as well. After reviewing a lot of the recordings that we've been doing and a lot of testing that I've been doing, the old webcam that I was using had this feature called autofocus built into it. And of course, you guys noticed every single time I switched the slide, the thing would focus and refocus. It was driving me nuts. I'm sure it was driving you guys nuts. So I got a slightly different webcam today. It came with some funky features like what you're seeing down here, where we can put some text on the screen and stuff. And I have a little bit better control over the focus and the lights. So we'll see how this goes. So course lecture number 3 today, the urban citizen and globalization, is what we'll be chatting about today. And if I turn on my actual slide presenter, maybe we can make some advancements here. So the roadmap for today, we got some announcements for you. We'll break into our lecture for today. I've only got about 14 slides for our lecture today, and that's kind of about where I want to keep it. So today is going to be kind of a common day for our live streams. I also want to look ahead towards what will be coming up due at the end of this week. And also something called On the Horizon, where I want to take a look at what's coming up in week 3, just so you can kind of keep some ideas in the back of your head about what you may want to do for our first project that we have coming up. And then also what I want to do is an in-class activity called Redux, which is essentially the activity I wanted to do at the end of Thursday's class, but the internet gremlins prevented us from doing so. So we'll see how it goes today. So some quick announcements. I just wanted to say solid effort on your guys' 60-second video introductions. Since they were just due last night and I was getting everything ready for this morning, I only had a chance to thumb through a handful of them quickly. But I definitely like what I saw. I definitely appreciate the effort you guys put into that assignment. One, it is helping us learn how to use our own technology that is available to us. Since we'll be doing a lot of project-based work and a lot of remote learning this semester, we have some projects kind of scaling us up into the bigger ones where we'll need to use some technology. And then also, I also want to say I did thumb through a couple of the idea journal assignments. It looks like the vast majority of you have a hold on those. I do leave comments on everybody's assignments, and so I will start doing that tomorrow. So you'll start to see some grades come in, usually about within 48 hours. And also I do offer comments on everybody's work, so you know exactly what you're doing well, some things to work on, et cetera, et cetera. Another thing, if you guys have any announcements that you would like me to make on the live stream, please email those to me, text me, phone call me, live stream me, whatever the case may be. I'll be happy to add them to this slide so I can make those announcements at the beginning of the day. Of course, you guys have the chat feature available through YouTube live stream as well. And so if you guys have any announcements that you didn't get a chance for me to announce, you can always use the chat feature as well. So let's kick things off today. So if we're talking about this idea of the global citizen or the urban citizen within this framework of globalism, one thing that we can do to kind of frame this world is you can really unpack and understand a lot about somebody's social systems, their cultural beliefs, by simply taking a look at the world around you. So as you travel to different cities, as you have lived in different cities, as you will travel to different cities throughout your lives, one thing to do is, as an urban planner, as a designer, somebody who engages with the built environment, is to take a look around at the urban design around you and see how it reflects local cultures. So here in the US, right, one thing that you can easily look around is take a look around and you'll notice all the freeways, all the roads, all the interconnectedness, the intricacies of intersecting interstates across the country. And one thing you will notice about how these are used is predominantly freeways get flooded at certain times of the day. And so by using the powers of observation and taking a look at how much money is put into this type of urban design, you can really notice that the US is predominantly a car culture because of how many roads we have. And we seem to have some sort of established social practices based on the times that we use our freeways. So we usually have a rush hour in the morning, people leaving home who traditionally, the vast majority of us live in suburbs and are traveling to our jobs. So we require transportation for that. And then in the evening, it seems like the vast majority of us get off work about the same time. Okay, cool. So my smartwatch sends me little alerts from YouTube every now and then, and that was just confirming the live stream is going. So I apologize for checking my watch there. And so you'll notice that we seem to have a certain social practice in the evening about coming home as well. Now you can shift gears and go to a completely different space and take a look at rural communities and how they actually use their land use. So rural communities are going to be much more spread out. You're going to see perhaps a lot more focus on agricultural equipment rather than the actual roadways or the infrastructure in the community itself. You may find rural communities that have a lot more dirt roads, gravel roads, things of this nature, and yet they have a $500,000 piece of farming machinery out in the fields doing work. And so you'll start to see a certain pattern when you start to take a look at the urban design and the way communities are built. But another interesting thing you can do too is you can take a look at community design regulations. And so you as the urban citizen, when you take a look at your environment around you, whether it be rural or in the city, are you noticing specific shapes, patterns, design choices? So for example, the city of Santa Fe actually has design regulations that no matter what your building is, whether it's a small, modest casita near downtown, or if it's the sprawling big box store of Walmart, there is only about 5 different shades of stucco that you are allowed to put on your building. And so that's why if you go to Santa Fe, they're trying really hard to maintain that Pueblo revival, New Mexico, Adobe kind of architecture look and feel no matter what is built in the area, because they're trying to capture that essence. So certainly if you go to Cape Cod out in the East Coast, you take a look at the houses that are built along the shore in states like Washington and Oregon. You take a look at maybe the farmhouse design in certain states like Idaho, example. Certainly where I grew up in the rural areas of Minnesota, a lot of the very small towns that were trying to attract tourist dollars to come in, they wanted everything to kind of be designed as a look and feel of a Norwegian fishing village. And so if you pull into the Holiday gas station in Tofte, Minnesota, it looks unusually like a large Norwegian fishing structure. So if as an urban citizen, taking a look at the world around you and seeing how the global influence can impact all of our communities is something that we'll be taking a look at in this class, and is something that you can do as part of your roles. So a question we need to ask ourselves as we start to explore this world of globalism and localism is, why consider the urban citizen? Well, the reason for that is because the world that we live in today looks and feels a lot different than what our textbooks present many of these ideas to us. And so largely thanks to technology, interconnectedness, the literal translation of globalization, it seems like what we find socially acceptable and how we choose to use the urban environment around us is much different compared to how it's presented to us. And so today let's unpack a little bit of this and just take a slice of it. So you as an urban citizen within the built environment, historically, we've always had this idea of distinct cultural communities, meaning that if you were here in Albuquerque, New Mexico, just as a smaller example, the people that you may see and the way development happens down in the South Valley was a very specific, distinct kind of cultural community versus what you may see as you go towards the Sandias and you start to see a lot more of the money in that area and people building their bigger homes on the side of the mountain. And everything that entails. And so you'll see that across areas, you'll find a very distinct cultural community. And the way that you act within these communities was also very specific as well. And so you expand this small scale, this small idea, and you think about how we act in general here in Albuquerque to how people talk and act in Boston, Shanghai, Tokyo. There seems to be a certain social values that are confirmed within these communities. And what that does is that affirms your local citizenship. And so you can find a lot of examples of this. My favorite one is always to take one of my favorite heavy metal bands, Megadeth. One of their lead guitar players, Marty Friedman, used to be their lead guitar player. And he now lives in Japan. He moved out there about a decade or two ago. And even though he still maintains the long heavy metal haircut and he does all this intricate heavy metal music on guitar, he's really become part of the Japanese culture, where even some of the music that he plays has integrated the tonal patterns and the arrangements of Japanese music. And so even though he came from a very different culture, he has retooled himself. And now his social values, his music, a lot about him seems to confirm his place in the local citizenship. And even more bizarre, the Japanese government actually appointed him, I think the musical culture minister or something like that. And he performed the official heavy metal version of Japan or something. I don't remember the details, but what I'm trying to say is that as you go around, you can definitely feel like an outsider when people within certain communities have a certain confirmed social value put on place. And so we, as the kind of the modern generation, today we seldom grow up in a monoculture society. Being part of the global citizenship is that as we are born and grow and become our own people, we're not just monoculture. We're not just exposed to the same thing over and over. We're constantly now flooded with an entire world of culture and belief systems. And really, this is responsible for tech. The proliferation of the internet really does provide us firsthand of experiences of diverse cultures from around the world, even though we're at home. We may never leave the couch, and yet we are very familiar, thanks to the internet, with the interworkings of South Africa. And so because we're kind of exploring this new space, really developing what's accepted within the local culture really has become more complex. Because what we're trying to do is we're trying to navigate this new global culture. And so, for example, you may take the way that I am dressed, right? Here in New Mexico, this looks and feels very unusual. When I was working for the state of New Mexico, when I was a public health emergency management planner for the Department of Health, this is how I would dress every single day, minus the hat, and usually I wore a tie instead of my choker. And when I bumped into new people and met new people from the department, they would always ask me, "Are you going to a job interview later today? Is there something going on that should I have dressed up for this meeting? Like, why are you presenting yourself like that?" And so here in New Mexico, this felt very unusual. But from where I'm from the cultures that I've participated in online and physically, being a musician, being an artist, being an academic, being an educator, being Native American, fulfilling many different roles within my own cultural communities, this is actually very dressed down. And so as we explore this idea of the new global citizen, what it is to walk around, what it is to present ourselves in the local context and in the global context, we're really breaking down this idea of the monoculture experience. And so that is something we'll explore further as we go throughout the semester. So let's pause here in the lecture for a brief moment and let's chat. Take a moment to test to make sure everything's working okay. And using the chat feature in YouTube, I'd like to pose this question. What is something unique that represents New Mexico culture? What is something that you feel is distinctively New Mexican? It could be a cultural thing that you've noticed. It could be something that you participate in. So let's take a moment, use the chat, and let me know what is something that is very New Mexican. And I'm going to grab a sip of Joe here. Ristas. All right, cuisine. Thanks, Aaron. Turquoise. Thanks, Ines. Tribal feast days. Thanks, Nicholas. Victoria, Chile. Absolutely. People speaking English with Spanish words thrown in all over the place. I definitely like that one. Thanks, Zaya. Aaron Hill, the way New Mexicans pronounce their A's and track at the end of every sentence. Okay, I could definitely get on board with that. I definitely have several friends that use that. Karen confirming turquoise jewelry. All right, thank you very much. So you guys can definitely continue that conversation in the chat if you'd like. So one thing to think about here is that with everything that we've thrown out here so far, with the chili ristas, the strands of chili hanging from the portals in our patios, tribal feast days, where we definitely here in New Mexico, since we have the highest number of tribes for any state in the Union, definitely seems like tribal feast days are definitely something that's predominantly New Mexican. Yeah, stucco. Thanks, I would definitely agree with that as well. That stucco is definitely something that may have evolved from the local practice of adobe, right? So one thing I want to pose to you, though, is that are all of these things distinctively New Mexican? Where do we actually draw the line that says this is of origins of this place? And so as the global citizen, when you start to take a look at the world around you, are these things actually local to the place, or were they borrowed and adapted through the process of globalization? So absolutely, turquoise jewelry is something that is pretty unique from the area. But turquoise jewelry and that whole process actually came about from the World War II. The vets coming home, this new influx of American industrialism, where now a lot of American men had this kind of wanderlust thanks to being outside of the US and Europe and other places. And so they started to travel around the US. We had a lot more money. And so predominantly turquoise jewelry and silversmithing wasn't something that was super traditional and super specific to Navajo culture, as an example. This is something that came out of the experience of a lot of tourists coming into New Mexico and kind of capitalizing on that entrepreneurship of being able to produce jewelry in order to sell to the tourists coming in as a way of financial support. And so while today the process of turquoise jewelry, and of course there are historical and cultural significances going, of course, way back, but the idea of the turquoise and the tin jewelry that we know today is very different. And so where do you draw the line of saying that is something specifically New Mexican? And so certainly, as you'll see, when you take a look at a lot of these things that we talk about, and as we continue to take a look at our communities and the world around us, we'll notice where do we want to draw the line about how original these things are. So let's connect that idea to last week, right? So if we're talking about globalism as the flow of ideas, goods, and people across cultures at an unprecedented speed, how can we relate the growing of Chile and the mass production methods that we use today and kind of having Hatch Chile kind of be this global brand now? And so that is definitely the flow of goods across the United States and across the world at an unprecedented speed, where now all of a sudden Hatch Chile is kind of a global icon from the area. And so certainly Chile itself could be a physical product, a representation of globalization. So what we'll be taking a look at in the coming weeks here is the idea that globalization has always occurred, right? These flow of ideas and people at unprecedented speeds. It's just that in the past, we would consider this to be a regional scale of globalization. meaning that it truly wasn't global. But again, that's a literal interpretation. If we're thinking about the cultures and the people in the world as they knew it, yeah, it's a region, but to them, that was the globe at the time. And so, in the coming weeks, we'll take a look how some of these other forms of globalization came into being and faded away. Now, the thing I do want to delineate a little bit here is that typically this conversation of intercultural ideas, the tying together of, certainly what Ines was saying here, the Zia symbol, how the Zia symbol is kind of this borrowed icon from the Zia Pueblo. It may represent to a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It may represent New Mexico. It could represent a kind of colonistic form of conquest. The adoption of symbols and culture, which usually has a very negative stereotype associated with colonialism. We're definitely going to get away from that a little bit. And the reason for that is that's kind of really the fallback story, the default tale that a lot of people use to kind of center and express the ideas of intercultural exchange that was largely forced upon us as a part of colonialism. But let's consider this a little bit differently today, because certainly thanks to technology like the internet that we're using today to do this class, this allows us or provides us a very positive space where we can now trade intercultural ideas freely on the internet, talk about our own communities in order to help other communities completely across the globe. And so today and throughout this course, let's consider this a little bit differently about taking a look at globalization as the free kind of trade and expression of ideas to actually help one another rather than kind of this colonialistic framework. And so let's set the stage and talk about a little bit why it feels so different to us than the world may feel to our parents and grandparents, who did largely influence us as we were growing up. And so I want you to consider this, that unlike today, predominantly and historically throughout our entire history, we have been what's known as a labor-based economy. And without getting totally into the weeds of economics here, let's just kind of frame this in a way that we can talk about it today. And so in a labor-based economy, essentially what you're talking about is you're talking about the amount of effort, the amount of work, the amount of material, the amount of whatever it is that is needed to produce a tangible good. And so if you think about the production of steel, steel beams that we use to build skyscrapers today, what is the amount of effort that it takes to mine that material, produce it in a factory, everybody that works in the factory, the cost of health insurance, et cetera, in a labor-based economy, what is the amount of effort that is needed to produce that thing? And so what that does is this requires you to take a look at people as skilled individual labor, meaning that you don't necessarily have to know how the steel is made, mined, sold front to back. Your job may just be operating the smelting machine. And your part of that skilled individualized labor contributes to this broader process. And so you can relate this to a lot of our practice today, manufacturing, agricultural practices, et cetera. But as a working skilled individual, you're not just being paid a living wage, you're also being paid a living wage that allows you to buy the same goods that you're producing at the end of the process. And so think about being on an assembly line for a car. Your job may simply be to rivet this one bolt that's part of the front fender. But because of the amount of money you're paid, the worth of your skilled labor, at the end of the day, you are able ultimately to purchase the same vehicle that you are working on as part of this process. And so largely historically, we've always been a labor-based economy. The value that is put into the effort and the final product of the sale of the thing that was produced as part of our labor. But that's not necessarily how we're operating today. Granted, a labor-based economy is always going to be intertwined in this. But the thing I really want you to think about today is that largely today, in the time of our own generations, we've largely transitioned to what's known as a service-based economy. And so what this means is that emphasis, rather than on the production of things, is now placed on the service that you can provide with the tangible goods, not necessarily the labor that went into producing the tangible good itself. And so think about it this way, that you largely today are not engaged in a labor process. You're not out there taking college classes and then in the evenings, at the factory stamping license plates, or at the wood factory cutting beams for vigas and houses, right? Largely today, that's not what the emphasis is on. Is largely you are providing some sort of service today for the benefit of others who are using their money to pay for that service. And that's how this new kind of trade circle goes. So it could be housekeeping, healthcare, information technology experts, tour guides, et cetera, is that you are providing some sort of service. And the reason this is so significant today is because largely today, the US economy, our total GDP, our total gross domestic product, the amount of money that is in our economy, about 67% of that is based off service-based services, not in the manufacturing of goods and products, not in the labor that it took to actually produce those products. It's actually in the services that we provide with those products. And so essentially what we're trying to take a look here is kind of like the goods that we use every day, we trade services for other services we can't perform, right? And so while I may not know how to weld, I am really good at wiring car stereos. And so maybe I have a friend or somebody knows somebody that refers me and says, well, Jordan's really good at wiring car stereos, and he does have an old 4x4 that he uses for camping. Maybe he needs something welded on it, and you could trade that service, et cetera. And so when we're thinking about the services that you guys offer, what are you doing out there? Are you part of the customer service industry? Are you part of the handyman service industry? What is it that you are taking place in, that you are providing a service if you are not part of the labor that goes into manufacturing goods? And so the theory behind that can seem really broad and really vague. So let's just simplify this, because for a lot of the work that we will be doing in our communities and our projects, we really want to focus on our local community, and ultimately the work that we do in this class, we wanted to do something to try to better our community, or at least put ideas out there that helps somebody else. So let's do an example of a labor-based economy, and let's take the simple idea of lemonade. You are setting up a lemonade stand on the corner in front of your house in order to make a little of that green for the upcoming weekend, right? So in a labor-based economy, you're going to be first taking a look at what does it take to grow the lemons? How much labor do you need to put into the trees to grow them? Where do you get your soil from? If you are too busy or don't necessarily have the ability, do you have the money to pay for somebody else's labor to come in and grow those lemons? When it comes harvest time, when the lemons are ready to be pulled from the tree, how much effort is it taking you to go out there and actually harvest those lemons? And then you start to process them into lemonade. Are you also manufacturing your sugar? Are you also maybe growing the mint leaves that maybe you mix into the lemonade to add a little zest to it as well? After you process it, how are you marketing it? Before you set up your lemonade stand, do you have a table? Do you need to buy a table? Can you build a table, a wood table? How about the signage that you need to advertise it? How much do you need to buy or purchase markers, et cetera, et cetera? And then finally, when you finally get to sell your glasses of lemonade, how much are you selling your lemonade for to encompass that entire process? The amount of money that went into growing the lemons, the amount of money and effort it went into harvesting them, the labor to process them, et cetera, et cetera. And so largely, if you were to take how much it costs to produce a glass of lemonade entirely in a global-based economy, Do you have the ability to actually bring that price down enough to sell that glass of lemonade to other people who are taking part in this process in order for you to actually sell it enough for people can afford it and want to enjoy it? And so that's how a labor-based economy would work, using a simple idea of a lemonade. But under a service-based economy, it looks very different to us. And so I know this text is a little small to read. I'll be putting this PDF of the lecture on the site after we're done today. But essentially, if you're taking this exact same lemonade stand from the service-based perspective, you're not getting your lemons locally. The vast majority of lemons that we actually purchase today are actually grown in India. But India doesn't process the lemons. Their labor-based economy is focused on the production, the growing of the lemons. And so what India does is they actually ship the lemons to China to be processed. Because China has a lot more effort and energy put into industrialization and production than it actually does into the growing of the lemons. And so India grows them, harvests them, sends them over to China. China processes the lemons into a handful of different products. Those products are then shipped globally, and then you can go out to your local grocery store where you can actually purchase a lot of these various products that are made from lemons that started off over in India. Now, up to this point, you and your lemonade stand are largely disconnected from this process. You don't participate or put any money or have any thoughts or ideas into the regulations of the Indian farmers who are growing the lemons, the factory workers in China that are processing these, et cetera, et cetera. But when it gets to you, where the service-based economy kicks in, is that once you purchase the lemons, you personally consume them using money that you have made providing other services, or you transition and take those lemon-based products, make your glasses of lemonade, and then sell those to others. And that's why we can sell lemonade for $1 a glass in front of our house to our friends, family, and neighbors, and actually maybe make a little bit more money than what it actually took to purchase them over on the other side there. And so just using this simple idea, take a look at any of the products in your house, any of the services you provide. When you start to follow the chain of this as a global citizen participating in this process of globalization, where do you enter the process throughout providing these services with these tangible goods? And so as we move forward with our projects, midterms, and finals, that's certainly something to consider. Now, the thing that feels very disconnected from both of these processes is that the service-based economy, at the peak that it is today, feels very disconnected to older generations compared to how we are operating today, right? So just as an example, when I tell people about how I'm teaching this class versus maybe how other professors are teaching their class, how we're integrating technology, certainly some older generations, this is like Star Trek to them. They feel like they would never be able to click on the button to enjoy the class. This is not a personal experience. There's no handshake involved. So they may feel very disconnected from this process because to them, education may be coming to the classroom, purchasing the book, taking notes, taking exams. And at the end of the day, handshake with the professor, thanks for the class today, and before they leave. And so because we are engaged in a very different type of global world compared to previous generations, this does help explain a lot of the divide where you can use the phrase make anything great again. Because for older generations, they may feel because of the way they did things that was more tangible, they were more involved in the process, feels more connected and real compared to us who are largely engaged in a service-based economy who are using the goods without even having taken a role in their production. Take the idea of a programmer, the entrepreneur trying to think of the new app to put on a smartphone. So that way people can use the skills as a programmer, use the backbone of the internet that is already provided to them by others, and being able to make money by simply designing something as a service that people can download. Sometimes it's a game because you're in the entertainment service industry where you are providing distractions of entertainment for people during our bigger quarantine lockdowns, right? And so take this idea, and when you're ever come into conversation about anybody who's talking about make America great, make education great again, whatever the case may be, it's a very interesting way to think about that. And so let's take a quick break from the lecture again, and I would like to pose this question to you guys. What generation gap experiences have you guys personally lived? And I do just want to make a quick note that politics and religion are way too easy, so let's stay away from those. Lots and lots of social sciences research has proven time and time again that as more and more people live in cities, we do become more liberal. And so it's too easy to contrast politics and religion. So throw some ideas out there. Use the chat. What generation gaps have you experienced? Something that you've discussed that other people just feel so disconnected from, or maybe that older generations have mentioned that you just feel totally disconnected from. I see some ideas flowing in. I'll give it just another second here. I'm going to grab another sip of coffee. So Nicholas, I saw that you said that there. Dan Carlin has a really good podcast about the golden era in Japan. Mindset making. Oh, thanks. I'll definitely look into that. Kids don't go outside and play anymore. Thanks, Denise. Yeah, I would definitely say that as well. Prior to moving, my kids didn't really go outside to play because the suburb we lived in, there was too much fear of a pit bull getting loose. There was people driving way too fast. Since I've moved downtown, there's literally no traffic on my street, so I feel a lot better about my kids going outside because people are a little bit more responsible. TikTok, I now feel irrelevant. Yeah, I would definitely say that TikTok has been an interesting influence on the world. We may actually build that into the lecture towards the end of the semester when we start talking about digital communities, so thanks for that. Technology use for sure, absolutely. Aaron, technology even at my age, thank you for that. We weren't on the internet so much. Yeah, I definitely get that a lot as well. Social media. Yeah, social media has only really been prevalent for the last 8 to 10 years. And so if you think about how much social media has really engaged in your life, you can certainly think about that. Older individuals don't know how to use ellipses in texts. Okay. Fashion trends are a big one for me. Yeah, okay, I would definitely agree. My main thing recently is the TV different generations growing up with. For example, my dad and boyfriend grew up watching the same shows, and I grew up watching different shows. Yeah, that's actually been very interesting. I don't know if you guys have seen WandaVision, the Marvel series on Disney Plus yet, but they basically go back in time and they're kind of making social commentary on the different generations of TV shows. And as I sat down to watch those with my kids every Friday night, they were basically asking me, it's like, wait a minute, why are they sleeping in 2 different beds? Why is everything in black and white? It's like, why are the effects no good? And so being able to kind of understand different TV shows to my own kids and engage in that conversation was certainly different. So thank you very much for all of those. I really appreciate it. If you guys continue the conversation online, please feel free to do so. So let's wrap up these last couple of slides here and move on to our final activity and taking a look at what's due at the end of the week here. And so basically what I'm trying to say here is that right now as an urban citizen, a lot of us are feeling some identity shifts. And what's very unusual about this also, that one thing we did not talk about in the text discussion here is that today's focus is a lot more on individual fulfillment, more than the social greater good of things and people than it has been in the past. Certainly we can have a lot of different conversations about the use of masks today during the current pandemic. About how people do and do not use those. We could link that to the idea of maybe that's a larger, selfish, individual fulfillment rather than using them for the greater good of society. Maybe you want to take that idea and turn it into one of your comic strips that'll be coming up due next week. But we'll talk about that. And so because of this, with largely the focus today on our social individual selves, we share a lot fewer common experiences, even though we're in the same room. And so if this was a face-to-face class and we actually had the time right now to unpack what we would consider to be the shared common UNM student experience, because we have so many different groups, so many different programs, so many different interests, can we actually come together and describe what is the shared common student UNM experience when so much emphasis is placed on the individual today? And so that's something to think about as part of these identity shifts as the urban citizen. And so largely thanks to globalization, this process of no longer living in this monoculturalistic areas where the world is influencing us quite a bit, globalization has really shifted how we see ourselves as urban citizens, meaning that to be a good urban citizen, is your role now to recycle? Because it means there's less material being shipped outside the United States, which could ultimately have an impact on water pollution and air pollution from shipping our recycling overseas to be processed in other countries. When you're talking about being the urban citizen, is it to only buy free trade coffee? Because maybe by only purchasing free trade products, you are largely participating in the global citizen, being part of the global citizenship. And so we all kind of make different choices. And it seems like because we're all making different choices that connect to different parts of the globe, we can largely feel disconnected from these shared experiences. And so today, it is not uncommon where we do feel pretty removed from the production and the labor of everyday items, as well as experiences. And a lot of experiences today feel artificial. For example, does this course lecture by using live streaming feel artificial? Maybe you're not getting as much out of it compared to if we were in Zoom. If we were using the Zoom technology where we were all in different little bubbles and we could see each other and we were all struggling with our cameras and our audio and maybe accidentally leaving the microphone on when the dog is barking in the background, right? So is this experience more artificial compared to that one? Is this experience better? Is this educational experience more artificial than if we were in the face-to-face classroom? Well, because each one of us is an individual and has individual focus on how we adopted technology, this experience may feel better or worse to a lot of people. And so it's going to be different for all of us. So because we feel so disconnected from all everyday items, I want to take a moment just to consider one. And so after this class, when it ends at 10:45, give or take, soon thereafter, we will be thinking about what we're going to have for lunch. And possibly some of us may be having a chicken sandwich. I've actually been vegetarian for the last 4 to 5 years, and so I will not be participating in this. But certainly I've had a fair share of chicken sandwiches in my day. So today, if you certainly pay attention to socially vast media, chicken sandwich wars are a thing now, right? Where Popeye's chicken sandwich versus Golden Pride's chicken sandwich versus Chick-fil-A's chicken sandwich, right? It seems like everybody's vying for who has the best chicken sandwich. Well, that's the conversation that you're engaged in. And you certainly may go out and purchase all of these different chicken sandwiches to determine on your own which one is the best. But before you purchase that sandwich, are you thinking about how the chickens were raised? Were the chickens produced as part of mass farming, mass industrialized chicken factories? Were they free-range chickens? How were the chickens raised? How was the meat actually produced once the chickens were grown? One thing that's very unusual about here in the U.S. is that we actually have a certain agreement and legalese written into our international trade agreements where we can actually ship our chickens raw once they've died to China, have them process the meat and send it back to the US. And at no part during the process or the packaging or the listing are we required to disclose that that occurred as part of the process. It's just assumed that that is part of the production of raw chicken. So very interesting how laws and legalese work in our country. So once the meat is produced, how is it prepared? Is it being prepared in the factory as well? Are you purchasing raw chicken and preparing it yourself in your kitchen? How are the fast food restaurants preparing the chicken? Does it come to them already prepared and they're basically just microwaving it up? Or are they actually taking raw chicken and making the sandwiches themselves? And so by the time we purchase a chicken sandwich for lunch, we're so disconnected from everything that happened to get the chicken sandwich that we largely forget the dozens upon dozens of people that it took as part of the agricultural, the raising process, the dozens upon dozens of people it took to actually part of the meat production, and the dozens upon dozens of people that were actually involved in the cooking of the chicken as well. And so to us, everyday items as part of our service-based economy really feel disconnected. And it doesn't have to be a chicken sandwich, right? It can be our computers. It can be the chair that we're sitting on right now. And so when we take a look and we start to get engaged in a little bit more of our projects, this is kind of the backbone of our discussion that we'll be using for that. So let's kind of wrap it up here. And so there's kind of this interesting idea that's floating around as well, that as being part of a global citizen or as being a good urban citizen, there also seems to be something that says that we are so disconnected from even our social practices that is also having an effect on us as well. So it doesn't have to be just food and products. It can also be social groups. And I'm just going to throw the goth kids out there. And the reason for that is certainly when I was a younger man, I certainly flirted with the world of being a goth kid, right? I wore a lot of black in my day. But what's really interesting about this is that by participating in a subgroup or a cultural group, right, that we're also further disconnected from the larger, what is socially accepted across the larger culture, right? And so there's been some interesting research in this. So for example, research has shown that within these subcultures, you know, if you're a goth kid, is that you are largely psychologically disconnected from death. And so because of the way you act out and the way you dress and kind of the literature you read and the music you listen to, that kind of you're psychologically trying to reconnect yourself with part of that distant social practice. Because historically, before the rise of funeral homes, you know, when you had a family member die, you prepared them and actually buried them all amongst the family. But today, that's largely outsourced. So, you know, when grandma checks out of the picture, you're not taking care of the body. You're not preparing it for burial. You're not, you know, getting the friends and family and relatives together. You're largely outsourcing that now. And so now somebody else prepares grandma, sets up the funeral parlor arrangements, gets all the invites out there, handles the burial, et cetera, et cetera. And so there's something to be said about the research into these groups that says subconsciously we're craving something that's part of this cycle that we're now disconnected from. And so we kind of crave these withheld experiences. And so maybe that acts out through our dress, through our representation, through our cultural experiences. And so that's something to consider as well, is that sometimes the way that people present themselves to the world also represent something about themselves where they are subconsciously craving something that they are disconnected from. It doesn't have to be a tangible good or product. Sometimes it's a social practice. So to wrap up the conversation today for the lecture, to close this kind of idea, being a local urban citizen within this broad reach of globalization is new to all of us, right? Certainly, as we've discussed a few ideas in the chat today, there's definitely disconnects among not only the generations, but maybe even ourselves as well. And so if you're feeling disconnected as part of this experience, and, you know, insert joke here, I'm looking at you goth kids, ha ha ha, hang in there is what I'm trying to say. Because we're definitely going to explore this idea a little bit more, because this is largely the foundation that we're setting that you guys will be using as part of your projects in this class. And so if you're feeling a little disconnected, if you're feeling the world is a little too artificial for you, hang in there. We're going to unpack this because this is part of being the local urban citizen within this broader perspective of globalization. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns about today's lecture, please leave those in the chat. And after we get wrapped up today, I'll be happy to address those if you stay on the line here with us. But for now, let's go ahead and look ahead towards the end of the week. So coming up due Monday, February 1st, exactly a week from today, pretty light responsibilities. You only have idea journal number 2. Which will be due Monday. So the notes that you take from today's lecture and on Thursday's lecture is what you'll edit and morph into the idea journal number 2. And then we also have a very small set of assigned readings from our book coming this due Monday. So intentionally, this week was made a little bit light because if we look on the horizon to week 3, coming up due in 2 weeks, you'll have your first project as part of this class, which is to come up with, I believe, 5 comic strips that comment on globalization, all the things that we've been talking about up until when the assignment is due. And so these are just some examples from students from last year's class. You can see a pretty big difference in the art that went into these projects. And we will definitely talk about this at length next week so you guys know exactly what's going on. But there's no standard here for the comics that you produce. If you're a horrible artist and you are only good at stick people, I'm going to accept that because it's not the art that's important here. It's the social commentary that is going into the comic that you are producing that is commenting on localism, globalism, being an urban citizen in this day and age. And so you can see a pretty vast difference from the computer-generated art to versus the totally hand-drawn stuff. But again, so what I'm trying to say here is that even though this is not due for 2 weeks, it is on the horizon. If you have any clever ideas, thoughts that occur to you about globalism, maybe you want to do the mask idea I just talked about earlier in the lecture, that's definitely something to take a look at for the upcoming future. And so I'd like to close today by doing the activity that we were going to do last Thursday, but the internet gremlins prevented us from doing so. And so to get started, what I would like you guys to do is that either from your computer or from your phone, go to this link up here at the top. Or if you prefer to do this through text message, what you can do is make a text message. Instead of a phone number, you're going to send it to 37607. And in the body of the text, write Jordan James 480, and that'll immediately let you into the activity as well if you want to do it through text, or you can do it through a browser through your computer. If you go into UNM Learn in week 2, I have also put the link in there as well, so you guys can see the link to participate as well. So let's close up today by doing the activity that I wanted to do from last week. And so I'm going to leave this up here for a moment as I talk about the activity. And so the activity that we're going to be doing today is I want you to think about what we've talked about so far, because largely we've set the stage for how this class is going to occur, kind of the subject material we'll be diving into. You're getting a taste for that up to this point. But there's certainly lots of wiggle room through the upcoming semester. And so what I want to do today through this activity is, what do you want this course to be about? Certainly, it's around the main topic of globalization, community change, localism, and I know we haven't unpacked localism yet, but we're getting there. And so what do you want this class to also include that we may not have actually put in the syllabus, or you may have not actually seen so far? And so the reason for that is because we do have the opportunity still in our lectures to build topics in as we go. And so if you would like to see more material or a specific focus, we can do that. And so before I activate the activity, the one thing I just did want to say is, well, a lesson we learned from last week is this activity only takes one word submissions, but if you want to submit a few words together, do not put spaces in between them, put a dash in between them, and we'll see if that keeps the idea together rather than splitting it up. And so to activate the activity here, what do you want this course to be about? What do you want to be included in this broader discussion of globalization and localization? And so the activity is now active. Please go ahead and put in your submissions. What would you like this course to also include as far as topics? You may want to take a brief moment to review the syllabus if you haven't kind of had a chance to do so yet. Maybe there's some topics in there that you don't see, or if there is something that might fit really well during a certain week, you want it to be brought up. So let's just take a moment. And if you could for me, let me know what topics you would like to see appear in this course, because when you signed up to take this class, maybe you were really hoping we would discuss something specific. And so this is your guys' opportunity to take control of the class and help design what you personally would like to see. And so I'm just going to grab a sip of coffee here, and let's go ahead and see what comes in. Someone put in a very long response, so let's see here. Oh, okay, the period in between words works as well. I'll give it a few more minutes to pop up here, a few more ideas before I read them. And so the way this activity works as well is if you do see something specific on the screen, if you retype in that exact same word, it gets bigger. And so that means there's more emphasis on that topic. So just reading what we have here so far, I'm seeing environmental impacts. Absolutely. We actually have a small handful of guest lecturers that will definitely be talking about environmental impacts from their discipline's perspective. And so we'll definitely talk about that as well. Supports environment infrastructure or support environment infrastructure. It looks like that word may have gotten broken up there. Dualistic values. Okay. Usually dualism is something that we introduce in the beginning and don't really come back to. We just kind of continue to unpack the gray area. But we can definitely tie dualistic values back in as it becomes relevant. So thank you for that. I'll make sure to do that. Oh, the big long one I was going to read just got bumped. So maybe that will come back. So we'll give that a second there. Again, if you see something up here that you would like to support and make bigger, please retype in that word. All right, so we got social justice. Yeah, absolutely. So we'll definitely tie in some ideas of social justice as we get towards the second part of this course. And the reason for that is because the first half of the course, we're largely setting the stage, really unpacking what the main terms are before we get into the social impacts, because your final projects will hopefully be having an impact on social justice. And so we'll definitely dive into that. Environment just got really big. So, okay, we'll definitely make sure that gets in there. Just taking a look at the chat. Aaron, oh, yours is the thing that got bumped because it was too big. It was asking what tools we have as planners to interact with globalization. Absolutely. So some of the tools that we'll be investigating in this class that you can use as urban planners as part of this process of localization and globalization is definitely something that you will need to use as part of your final project coming up. So we'll be sure to spend some time on tools there. Planning methods to address globalization. Aaron, I'm going to assume that's you in a smaller version of what you said there. Animals, global ethical issues. Environmental impacts, social justice. All right, so maybe something got bumped. We're okay on there. So yeah, animals. So I will not be personally doing that lecture, but we have a guest lecturer from, what is her background? Museum sciences? I can't remember. I will look that up for you. But absolutely, we have an entire guest lecture about how animals and bioorganisms are impacted as part of the globalization process. So that'll definitely be an entire guest lecture dedicated to that topic. So yeah, global ethical issues. And so we may have some things getting bumped here just because maybe we've run out of room, because when you string too many words together, it gets bumped. And so we'll kind of end there with that for now. And so with this, I will capture this screen process input, and I will put that up on the website as a screen grab of what the activity that we did today. And I will be taking a look at how we can make sure that we build these topics in as well. For those of you that are watching this class non-live and are watching the recording later on, you can definitely email me any other thoughts that you may have as topics you would like to see as part of this course, and I'll be happy to also consider those and build those in as well. And so for today, that kind of wraps up our course lecture number 3. So thank you very much for participating today. It looks like the internet gremlins left us alone for the most part. I hope the snow squall that we all got this morning didn't strand too many, depending if you're up in the East Mountains or whatnot. It's probably already melting already anyway. I can't see out my window at the moment. But thank you all very much for your time today. I will stick around for 5 more minutes. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns you would like to address, please use the chat and we'll talk about that now. Other than that, you are free to go. Thank you very much for your time today, and I will talk to many of you on Thursday. Take care. Man, the kids are loud today. I'm sure you guys can hear that bumping around. Thanks, Zaya. Thanks, Aaron. Talk to you Thursday. So again, I'll stick around a few more minutes. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please use the chat and I'll address those now. Thanks, Kayla. Thanks, Aaron Hill. Have a wonderful day as well. I still see 9 folks in the live stream. Again, you're free to go if you'd like. Thank you very much. I'll talk to you Thursday. I'll stick around for questions in the live chat for a few more minutes. Looks like there's still 5 more people signed into the live stream. 4. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, please leave the chat or use the chat. And if not, you're free to go. All right, looks like just me and 1 other person in the live chat. I'm going to assume you're working on a question, so I'll just stay here for another minute. Oh, that's why the vent is right there. Okay, I still see 1 person on the live stream, but I'm not seeing any questions appearing on the chat, so I will go ahead and end the live stream for today. Again, those of you watching the recordings of this class, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please feel free to email me, text me, call me. I'll be happy to talk about those with you. If you also have ideas that you would like to see incorporated into this class, definitely reach out as well, and I'll be happy to work those in just like I did for this project here. So thank you very much, everybody. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.